You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody, and good morning. It is Locked On NFL Sunday here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Cody Roark here at Cody Roark NFL, myself, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jacksonola, and Cody, cheers to you, brother. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, my friend. We are Locked On NFL Sunday, my friend. I got a cup of coffee.
Just having a good time.
We have football action here today, Ross. I mean, what more could you ask for?
Simply can't ask for better. Here we are, week 3 of the NFL season. We've got some big quarterback news that we're going to start off with. Carson Wentz expected to play today. Justin Fields expected to get his first start today in place of the injured Andy Dalton. And then we're going to be joined by some of our experts here across the network. We'll talk with David Drogmeyer of the Locked On Chargers podcast about these 1-1 Chargers, about the matchup with division rival 1-1 Kansas City Chiefs. And then we'll be joined by our good friend Vinny Iyer toward the end of the show to talk more about some fantasy football as well. So very much looking forward to the cast of characters that we're going to have joining us today. I saved the best for last. Our Friday hosts for Locked On NFL and our Locked On Steelers host, Christopher Carter, who's going to be coming to us from the stadium from Heinz Field today to talk a little bit about Ben Roethlisberger and these Pittsburgh Steelers. And you know, Chris is always good for a laugh or 12 as well throughout. So very much looking forward to having the guys with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, like I said, hey, look, we've made it 3 weeks into the season. You know, there's a couple of storylines, though, all throughout the NFL. I feel like we should definitely monitor. Obviously, we're keeping an eye on injuries from across the NFL. Obviously, Tua Tagovailoa is out for at least 3 weeks after being placed on injured reserve with fractured ribs. Obviously, you know, Kyle Krabs, the Locked On Dolphins, will have you covered with all you need to know. Jacoby Brissett will get the start there for the Dolphins. So they're undergoing a little bit of some tumultuous waters here, you know, Ross, when we look at it. But not only that, too, I feel like we really have to bring up NFL officiating because what we saw once again Thursday Night Football between the Carolina Panthers, Houston Texans, 15 combined penalties thrown. We were seeing too many flags this year, Ross, and I feel like it's impacting the game negatively, not to mention the new taunting rule. It stinks. I don't like it.
It stinks. $94,000 worth of fines attached to the taunting rule so far this season in 2 weeks. It's absolutely ridiculous. And look, there's no surprise here. The more you add that can be penalized, the more penalties you're going to see. So every year we just see this new penalty, that new penalty, and this one, which is about as subjective as your standard roughing the passer call, or I would even say, you know, the defensive pass interference, offensive pass interference, subjectivity, things like that we've been seeing so far. This taunting rule is just a little bit too much for me in terms of being in the hands of who I would say are the wrong people right now for these refs and officials that have been making these decisions.
Well, absolutely, too. And Ross, football is such an emotional game. And, you know, when you make a big play, you blast somebody on special teams, get up and flex, like, have fun.
Right, have fun.
I think there's a fine line, Ross, between, like, what is celebrating versus taunting. Like, you know what? It's chippy. You know what happens? I imagine we're going to see at some point this season, somebody blows somebody up on a big play. They get up, they're in each other's face, and they're high-fiving each other, like both, you know, opposing team and the person who did it, and they're going to flag them still. Like, this is, I think, what you have. Like, look, that much money, almost $100K in terms of just taunting, penalties, and fines alone. That right there, where does that money go? Does it go to charity? Does it go to Roger Goodell's back pocket? I'm not sure. But the reality is this is an emotional game. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to be chippy. You know, Ross, you know this as well as I do, being a former player. We chip during the game, and it's all love afterwards. So it's like, why is the NFL making it so difficult, I think, for players to actually enjoy the games? I mean, they're not robots. Right. They want them to go score a touchdown, set the ball down at the ground, and then walk back. Like, don't show any excitement. I think it sends a wrong message.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This is supposed to be fun. It's hard fun out there, right? But it's supposed to be fun. You hear a lot of players, and I think it was Keyshawn Johnson who used to talk about this. He would say that the hard work happens in practice. Sundays are fun. Sundays is when it all comes together and you get to go out there and have a good time and you get to go out there and compete. And I don't understand why the correlation between competitiveness and arrogance, or competitiveness and taunting, or whatever it might be, is becoming so conflated. Who are we trying to save here? What is the point? Who is this helping? Where does this factor into a health and safety standpoint, if that's supposed to be the emphasis of this National Football League? I just don't see it. I don't see it. I would much rather see, a little bit more of a, I don't know, maybe a little bit more of a focus on, penalty review or making sure that things get right, all these other things, as opposed to this newly found emphasis on taunting. But anyway, we'll digress from the taunting topic, because clearly a couple of former players don't like taunting. Don't like taunting penalties. Imagine that. But listen, I want to talk about some of the quarterback situations that we're seeing around the NFL. We named a couple earlier. Let's start off with the Indianapolis Colts and Carson Wentz. Now, Cody and I have been sort of pretty consistent from the very beginning that if Carson Wentz was going to revitalize his career, Indianapolis seemed like the right place to do it. So something to watch for here in Indy is Carson Wentz coming back to the lineup, going up against the rival Tennessee Titans. He sprained both ankles, Cody, and now he's back out on this field here in week 3. How do you expect this injury to factor into what it is that makes Carson Wentz Carson Wentz?
What am I going to do about my legs, Eddie Murphy? Looking at this, the fact that Carson Wentz, for a guy that had an ankle injury in training camp that he had to have surgery on, that put him out, and he was barely ready enough for week 1, the fact that he's still dealing with an injury to that ankle on top of another one, look, I think it's smoke and mirrors right now. I know the expectation is that he's going to play, but I don't imagine we're going to see him too long. I mean, the fact that you have to do that and you have to try to be mobile, I mean, at some point, Frank Reich has to say, okay, look, for what's best for Carson Wentz, is it better that we hold him out this week or for 2 weeks or maybe even 3 weeks, put him on temporary IR, allow him to heal just so we can have a chance down the stretch? Because right now, I think it's risky for him to not be 100% healthy in the regard, especially from a position where you have to have good footwork at the quarterback position, and you also have to be able to run the ball from time to time, step up in the pocket, maneuver, and throw. If he can't do that effectively, he's more of a detriment to the team and the offense right now than he would be if he's healthy. So I hope that maybe they reconsider it. Maybe they call him a late scratch before the game even starts. But then again, he's going to try to toughen it out. And I think it goes back to what we talked about in Philadelphia, Ross, last year on Locked On NFL Sunday. The fact that he tried to do too much. He put too much pressure on himself, and he ended up getting hurt again. That's the same exact scenario right now here in Indianapolis. And to be honest with you, if I'm a Colts fan, I'm a little concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You have to be, because you've seen these re-injuries creep up over and over again throughout his career. And then now all of a sudden you see him coming back out on the field this quickly. I can't get over this, spraining both ankles. Spraining one ankle has kept players out for weeks and has hampered what they're able to do. And part of what makes Carson Wentz is his ability to be mobile in the pocket. He's not a running quarterback. He's not a dual threat by any means, but he can get outside of the pocket. He can extend plays. He can operate out of structure. He's a North Dakota State University quarterback. They all know how to do this. You could give Jacoby Brissett that if you wanted to. These guys have the ability to be able to operate out of structure. And Carson Wentz, with two strained ankles, it's just not going to put him in a position to be himself. So I completely agree with you. Wouldn't be surprised to not see him out on the field for very long on Sunday, especially going up against the rival Tennessee Titans. You don't want division losses this early on in the season. They can cause you some trouble down the road. And of course, when it comes down to the Colts, they're going to need some production over in the offensive side. Right now, the Colts are behind only the Falcons and Packers for most passing touchdowns given up. So a big day potentially on the way for Ryan Tannehill and the Tennessee Titans offense. Can Carson Wentz and the Indianapolis Colts keep pace? That'll be a big part of that storyline to watch. Next, I want to talk a little bit about, of course, probably the biggest news this week. Probably should have let off with this one, but Justin Fields is getting his first start for the Chicago Bears. And it's only happening, Matt Nagy, he's not willing to commit to Justin Fields as the long-term starter at this time, but injured Andy Dalton, Justin Fields is getting the start here. Do you think Justin Fields is going to be able to maybe sew it up here over maybe these next couple of weeks to earn that starting role and not relinquish it again?
I think if the offense looks electric, right, if they maximize some of their
Mm-hmm.
opportunities that they haven't been able to capitalize so far through 2 weeks of the season, if there's just a different energy, like for example, if Justin Fields in that huddle gets those guys bouncing and moving and gets rhythm, and they have more productive offensive drives than they did with Andy Dalton, it's going to be very hard, I think, for
Yeah.
anybody except Matt Nagy. Matt Nagy's already made up his mind, but it's going to be hard for anybody to sit there and say, hey, you can't play this guy. You can only use him in situational packages. I mean, Ross, I don't think we're sitting here and we're trying to blow smoke up anybody's rear here, but the reality is we all know that Justin Fields should probably be the starter this season for them. I mean, Andy Dalton came out in the preseason and said, he's got a bright future, but it's my time right now. Well, apparently not, because Father Time is disagreeing with you, my man. He's got a bone bruise in that knee, and that's very difficult. And it was reported this morning by Adam Schefter, he could miss more time. So, you know what you need to do right now if you're Matt Nagy? You need to put the safeguard in place. We need to bring Justin Fields up to speed even more. And there was a report this week that the Bears were blown away by just how much Justin Fields can do that they didn't realize before. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, come on. He's a prolific athlete. He's a first-round talent at the quarterback position. There's things he's got to do to improve and grow. But the reality is he gives you a better chance to win, in my opinion, than Andy Dalton, especially with that offensive line.
Listen, we have been notably on the side of dynamics on offense. And who gives you more dynamics? Justin Fields or Andy Dalton? I think it's easily Justin Fields for you there. So we'll see. The rookie getting his first start. Definitely looking forward to getting to see him in this matchup up against the Cleveland Browns. Not an easy matchup here. They've got great pass rushers on that opposite side. So I wouldn't be surprised to see sort of, if you watch the Thursday night game, Davis Mills, Houston Texans, got his first start as a rookie. First 2 passes were screen passes. These quick passes to the outside, get them in rhythm early. Even if you end up going 3 and out to open it up, get a couple of completions under Justin Fields' belt early, and then hopefully you'll be able to see him catch a rhythm and get in time as you get closer and closer to that game extending and him just finding a rhythm throughout all of that. So we'll see how it all goes down for Justin Fields, but very excited to see him make his first start today. If nothing else, we should get a couple of nice highlight plays out of it and be able to continue the argument in favor of Justin Fields being the long-term starter immediately in Chicago. Let's make it happen. And lastly, you talked about Tua Tagovailoa heading to injured reserve. Jacoby Brissett now getting the starts over with the Miami Dolphins. Now, Tua heading to injured reserve is a big hit for Miami, but how important is it to have a backup that has so much experience like Jacoby Brissett that you can just turn around and fall back on?
Well, it helps out. Obviously, for him, he stepped up into situations in New England with the Indianapolis Colts. He's got starting experience in the National Football League more so than Tua has, and he's a little bit more durable. He's a little bit more bigger framed. It gives you an advantage, but the reality of the situation is for the Miami Dolphins is what can you do with that? Can you amplify your offense's opportunities? Jalen Waddle, Devontae Parker, they have all this talent here, I think, at the wide receiver position outside, maybe the third and fourth string wide receivers to them, it's kind of questionable in terms of guys who are playmakers that can gain separation. But you have to figure out balance, right? Because it's not going to be easy. You're taking on a Las Vegas Raiders defense here today. That Max Crosby, Yannick Ngakoue, they've looked pretty good so far. Not to mention you're going up against a very explosive offense. The NFL's best offense right now with the Las Vegas Raiders, almost 500 yards per game. They're averaging on the offensive side of the ball through 2 weeks. That right there is very impressive. So can you put something on the field offensively that can maybe match that? And look, that Miami Dolphins defense, they're going to match up really well, obviously, with those skill players there, but it's a war of attrition. How long can you sustain that? If the offense goes 3 and out every single drive, it's going to be very difficult for the Miami defense to keep pace just because of the fact if they're on the field too long, it doesn't bode well for their chances. They have to be able to come out and run the ball here today, and I think take the pressure off of just the offense in general. Jacoby Brissett can manage the game well. He just got to do the most with those opportunities.
Absolutely. It's a little bit of a weird season to get started. We're talking about Las Vegas Raiders at the top of the NFL in terms of total yards. You got the New Orleans Saints at 32nd right now. It's just everything just feels a little strange, but you got to love it. This is why you love the NFL, because you just never know where things are going. But I'll tell you where we're going next. We're going to be bringing in our good friend David Drugmeyer from Locked On Chargers, talk about Justin Herbert, talk about that Chargers offense and defense. But before we get to that, we talked about 3 games there. Cody, we talked about that Indianapolis game. We talked about, of course, course, the Chicago Bears game, and then we just wrapped up our conversation around the Miami Dolphins game. So let's get a look at a couple of your picks from those games for this week. So we already see here that you have the Cleveland Browns, Chicago. You've got the Cleveland Browns winning that game against Chicago and Justin Fields' first start. I have to agree with you there. When it comes down to Indy and Tennessee, we've got Tennessee winning. And then when it comes down to Miami and Las Vegas, you've got the Raiders winning. So picking against the teams with the quarterback news, I have to agree with you there. It's the most important position on the field. Tough to combat all of the changing and switching and all the things that go on around a new quarterback coming in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, it's the safe pick here this week, Ross, but it makes the most sense. And I think especially with Chicago being on the road, traveling to take on Cleveland in Cleveland, the dog pound, they're going to be rowdy. And that defense, they're going to be very energized. Look, Myles Garrett is going to do whatever he can to get after Justin Fields. And that offensive line concerns me a little bit, even though they've actually, when we talked to Lauren Cox last week, they actually have played better so far to start the regular season than like they looked in the preseason. However, this is a really tough test. They did really well, in my opinion. They did better for the most part against the Rams, but now you face another tough pass rush here with the Cleveland Browns. And we'll see if Justin Fields can maintain that or build. We could be completely surprised, Ross. We might see one of these quarterbacks just absolutely explode. And I think it makes the NFL a lot more entertaining.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, look, if you're going to perform well against any defensive line, it should probably be the Los Angeles Rams. But speaking of Los Angeles, we're not going to be talking about the Los Angeles Rams anymore because it's time to talk about the real football team in Los Angeles. Sorry, Sosa, I had to do it to you. But let's go ahead and get our friend in here, David Drugmeyer, locked on Chargers at Dro Talk SD. How you doing, homie? Thanks for coming through, man.
Hey, doing really well. I mean, what's better than football in the morning, right? It's a great way to get your day started. I'm excited. This is an incredible AFC West matchup. These matchups are always intense. They're always great rivalries, so I'm ready to get it on. Let's go.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about the Chargers here to start off the season. Obviously, a 1-1 start. They had an impressive win against the Washington football team week 1. Last week against the Cowboys, a very entertaining back and forth, but sort of a couple of missed opportunities, right? Or a couple of mistakes. Probably summarize the difference in that game. Obviously, with the Dallas Cowboys getting a game-winning field goal. Your initial thoughts so far through 2 games, Brandon Staley running things. I know you and the guys over there locked on Chargers are really excited about Brandon Staley. What have you seen so far from this Chargers team through 2 weeks that you didn't see from them particularly last season?
So, same prolific offense. They're moving the ball up and down the field in between the 20s with absolute relative ease. It doesn't seem like many defenses in the NFL are going to be able to stop them. But on the other side of the token, their defense, they're great against the pass, but once again, against the run, they've shown to be very susceptible. The Dallas Cowboys ran for over almost 200 yards rushing against the Chargers in that second game, and that was a major reason why they were having so much trouble scoring points. It's really, really bad. And then, of course, the penalties. The penalties have been the absolute biggest issue for the Chargers through 2 games. You were expecting this to be a very disciplined team because Brandon Staley's so detail-oriented. But in that second game, a major reason why they lost, guys, is because they had 10 offensive penalties in that game for 99 yards. You can't move the football when you're taking 3 steps forward and then taking 5 steps backwards. You're trying to get yourself out of quicksand, and that's not how you operate. That's not how you play winning football. And against the Chiefs, 2 things you cannot do is have penalties and not convert in the red zone.
Yeah, and against those Chiefs who have, I guess, surprisingly/unsurprisingly won 31 of their last 35 AFC West matchups, what is it that the Chargers have to do? You mentioned the penalties. Sound like you were talking about discipline there, but what else do the Chargers have to do in order to get 31 of 36 for the Chiefs there?
Yeah, looking at the Kansas City Chiefs, it's kind of scary how much these 2 teams kind of mirror each other. The Chiefs giving up over 400 yards on the ground through 2 games. Not good. So obviously, one of the keys for this game for the Chargers is to establish the running game. And that does a lot of things for you. One, that keeps your offense on the football field, keeps Patrick Mahomes on the sideline, keeps your defense on the sideline, keeps your defense fresh. So when they have to go out there, they're ready to go, they're rested up, and they're feeling good. Second of all, I talked about it earlier, you absolutely have to score touchdowns against this team. If you do not, they can score at will, and they will leave you in the dust. So you have to. The Chargers have not done it well enough through 2 games. They have a 30% touchdown rating in the red zone. basically 2 of 6, it is absolutely not going to get it done. They have to score touchdowns in this game. I know the cleaning up the penalties and scoring touchdowns was a big point of emphasis. And then on defense for the Chargers, they have to be ready for the off-script plays by Patrick Mahomes. They know that he can roll out, he can extend the play, he can throw from a million different arm angles and throw it accurately and throw it a million yards down the football field. So you cannot stop covering. You have to cover from whistle to whistle against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. If the Chargers are able to do those things, then I like their chances in this game.
Real quick note that I want to add just about the run game real quick. Chris Jones has been hampered all throughout the week. He was questionable, but is expected to play. Frank Clark out for this game. So more credence toward the idea of what you're able to do with the run game. Sorry, Cody, go ahead.
No, you're good. And I think that's a great point, too. You know, talking about pass rush for the Chargers, Joey Bosa, questionable this week. He was going through pregame warmups, so there's an indication that maybe he'll play. That'll be huge there. But if he's not able to go, it'll be very interesting to see who steps up. No Chris Harris Jr. He's got a shoulder injury that, has been hampering him since the week 1 game against the Washington football team. Obviously, they're missing him inside that slot in that nickel position. But you mentioned something about the run game, right? Well, the Chargers, while they struggled against the run last week, the Kansas City Chiefs, they also struggle against the run. So I think this is a great opportunity for the Chargers to have a balanced passing and rushing attack with Austin Eckler. I think he could be in line for a very big game. But my main question to you, who is one player on the offensive side of the ball that you're looking at this week that you expect to be a difference maker in this matchup? For me personally, I'm going to go with Mike Williams because I always feel like Mike Williams always has these big games against the Chiefs. Are you in alignment with that, or is there somebody else we should be looking for?
No, I really like that pick. Mike Williams through 2 games is having the best start of his career. He has 2 touchdowns. He has 2 performances of 90-plus receiving yards. And before the start of this season, the offensive coordinator for the Chargers, Joe Lombardi, said, hey, if you look up at the stat sheet at the end of the year for the X receiver and talking about Mike Williams, I think you're going to like what you see on the stat sheet. And so far, so good. He is on a crazy, crazy pace. Obviously, I don't expect that to continue, but I think there's a vulnerability in this Chiefs team over the middle of their defense. I think the linebackers can be targeted, especially they have a rookie out there that's playing a lot in Bolton. I think Jared Cook and also Donald Parham, the 2 big tight ends that the Chargers have. Cook's like 6'5", Parham's 6'8". So I expect that you're going to see him a lot, especially in the red zone. I think they're going to try to scheme ways to get him open and get him one-on-one looks. And I expect to see that because of that lack of success with the red zone offense. So incorporating the Twin Towers, as I like to call them, I think is going to be a very, very positive thing for the Chargers in this football game against the Chiefs.
Absolutely. Mike Williams right now 8th in the NFL in receiving yards with 173 yards and 2 touchdowns with 2 big plays over 20 yards. So, look, the last time these 2 teams met, Los Angeles got away with a win. Not got away with a win, came through with a win. That last, what was it, 38-21 in that last meeting in favor?
Against the Chiefs backups.
Take the momentum, man. Take the momentum. Can the Chargers make it 2 in a row? We'll be watching for it today. Hey, David, we appreciate you, buddy. Make sure you follow up with David, Dan, and the guys over at Locked On Chargers every Monday through Friday. And you can follow David on Twitter at DroTalkSD. Appreciate you coming through, homie. Always a pleasure to see you, man.
Appreciate you guys. Have a good one.
Hey, cheers to you. Cheers to you.
We got you.
What talking about.
Locked On Cups. We are good to go. A major shout out to the Locked On Network, for hooking us up with these cups. Ross, I guess we've been here for a while if we got these.
We've been around for a minute, man. We've been around for a minute. Hey, we gotta one of the things that we love about the Sundays show and that we try to make sure that we use to differ from maybe other pregame shows, that we try to make sure that we involve the folks that are watching as well. And we got a nice little comment here from GT500 who wants to talk about the greatness of the GOAT, Tom Brady. But I gotta say, Tom Brady has been looking good so far this season. That Tampa Bay Buccaneers team has essentially picked up right where they seem to have left off from last season. You got a couple of injuries, things like that are moving around there, of course. But hey, not a lot of complaints, I imagine, for Tampa Bay fans.
No, and look, today's matchup against the Rams might be a little early. NFC Championship game preview. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be, I think, Tampa Bay's true test so far through this season. Obviously, the Dallas Cowboys pushed them to the brink. But, when I look back at Tampa Bay for the first couple of games, Tom Brady has looked fantastic. And look,
Right.
this is coming from a guy who covers the Denver Broncos. I like Tampa Tom. I didn't like New England Tom. I like Tampa Tom. But the reality of the situation is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Ross, I'm pretty sure you could agree. Anybody will agree with this. They have put up a lot of points, but they've left so many more points out there on the field, which is
Very
scary.
true.
So if they can just get it clicking, it'll be good. It'll be tough today because obviously no Antonio Brown. You're going to have Chris Godwin
Right.
more than likely drawing the assignment of Jalen Ramsey. That's going to be a fun matchup to watch. This should be the Sunday night football game, in my opinion.
It really, yeah.
No
Here we
offense
go
to Green
again.
Bay, San Francisco, but this should be the Sunday night game.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tom Brady right now leading the NFL in passing touchdowns with 9 so far. So looking pretty good. And only 2 interceptions on top of that as well. So, you got to risk it for the biscuit.
And those were tip
as
passes,
his coach
too,
would say.
so-
Those are tip passes. That's true, yeah. So, man, it's a fun game, the NFL, and it's even better when the good teams are good. And speaking of good teams being good, I want to make sure that we give a shout out to our good friend Chris Carter, because there's just no better personality on this network. You can catch him Fridays with your boy Q over on Locked On NFL, and you can catch him every Monday through Friday over at the Locked On Steelers podcast. And check out this magnificent view behind the one and only Chris Carter. That is the Heinz Field, the Chris Carter at Carter Critiques on Twitter. Chris, appreciate you coming through, homie. How are you, man?
I'm all right. I hope
good.
I'm
It's
coming
that
through
Wi-Fi
straight 'cause
stick.
there's a lot of scoreboard music behind me.
You're
guys
good. You're
hear
good.
me?
Yeah. A little bit of a delay, but yeah, we can hear you. A little bit of a delay. No big deal, though. We'll get all through it. But yeah, it looks beautiful behind you, man, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely. Let's get to it. What you guys want to know?
All right. Well, you have the Cincinnati Bengals, obviously a division matchup here between both of these teams. And I think the biggest question here, Chris, is looking at the Steelers team. They're 1-1. Ben Roethlisberger, the offense, they've been passing the ball, but through 2 weeks, the same story continues. They're having a little bit of an issue being consistent with trying to get the run game going. Do you think that opens up a little bit more today?
I think they're certainly going to try, Cody, because I'm telling you, man, this is going to be an interesting matchup with this Bengals front. They've talked a lot about their interior defensive linemen going into this week. You still have the same Steelers offensive line. They've talked about being more physical. Trey Turner, got into trouble for spitting in a guy's face, retaliatory to him getting spit on last week. Lots of stuff going on with this offensive line, but 2 rookies, Kendrick Green and Dan Moore Jr., they've been extremely physical. They just have to polish their game. You'll see Kendrick Green, I guarantee you. They call a screen pass. They call a play where he's pulling and lead blocking. He'll be flying 300 miles an hour down the field looking to hit somebody. Finishing guys off, he still has to work the polish, to use the right hand, right footwork, and put guys away on drugs. That's the offensive line's biggest problem. It's not a complete collapse across the board. It's always one guy just missing one detail, and that one detail leading to the collapse of the running game. I'm intrigued to see what they do. I think last week, though, they started to see the secret is really Najee Harris. Just get him out in space, and he's a playmaker. He had that massive stiff arm on 8 and a 25-yard touchdown reception that broke open the game for him.
Man, he's going to be electrifying to watch, and he is going to be somebody that I think a lot of fantasy owners are going to be very happy with whatever decisions they made, particularly in dynasty leagues where they grabbed onto him. Hey, Chris, at the beginning of the season or before the season started, when we were talking about TJ Watt and his upcoming extension, potentially signing it on the plane to week 1, all of that, that contract got done. How is that sort of sitting with the rest of this Pittsburgh Steelers team to have that out of the way and done and be able to focus on football right now?
Oh, they love it. And you guys should know there was a lot from this team, from the players and the coaches. Cam Hayward, Ben Roethlisberger, every defensive player, every offensive player was saying, sign TJ Watt, get this done. They were tired of waiting around for it. When it finally happened, I can tell you, Mike Tomlin standing behind TJ Watt as he was doing his press conference after signing it, he looked like the proud father being like, that's my boy. And it was just kind of, that's the feeling you got from these guys. But there's really a sense that, like, now that he's signed, everyone's allowed to focus. The trouble, though, is he's out this week with a groin injury. Alex Highsmith, their other starting edge rusher, is out this week with a groin injury. So now what was their deepest position in week 1 that allowed them to beat the Bills is now a liability. You got Melvin Ingram still starting, but undrafted second-year player Jameer Jones starting out there. They got a practice squad guy promoted up this week. It's going to be a serious challenge to see if they can get this group going. They're going to be leaning on players like Cam Hayward, Devin Bush, who's back from injury, Joe Hayden, who's back from injury, and Minkah Fitzpatrick to maybe make some game-breaking plays for the defense.
I think it's a great point you bring up too, right? Because last week the Las Vegas Raiders came to town. They aired it out. Derek Carr, I mean, they're off to a hot start. But now for the Cincinnati Bengals coming into this matchup, T. Higgins isn't active, so now the defense can really focus a lot on Jamar Chase. Do you feel like they're better suited for this matchup this week than they were for the Raiders last week?
Well, absolutely when it comes to coverage, because Joe Hayden was out last week, and it was very unexpected. They thought he was going to play, and then his groin acted up that morning of the game, and they had to pull him and Devin Bush. That forced Alex Witherspoon, the guy that they put outside corner, and he's the one that got toasted by Henry Ruggs. If Joe Hayden's out there, that means either him or Sutton are run with that play, and most likely that doesn't happen, and there's better communication on the field. I look forward to this defense, seeing how they respond to missing their best player in T.J. Watt. But this secondary will be in full regale. They'll be out there. I expect them to be aggressive against Joe Burrow. They talked about how he's not as mobile as he has been in the past. When Joe Mixon and Force was there, they saw those 3 interceptions he threw back to back last week. They want to up their interception numbers this week for Minkah Fitzpatrick and Joe Hayden and Terrell Edmonds. They've all been playing good on the field.
Gotta love it. Chris, I think it's going to be a very exciting matchup to watch today. Division battles, love them early on in the season, and nobody breaks down everything going on with the Pittsburgh Steelers better than our guy right here, Christopher Carter, at Carter Critiques on Twitter, every Monday through Friday on Locked on Steelers, Fridays Locked on NFL with your boy Q. Brother, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. We know you got a lot that you got to get done. Have fun at the game today, and enjoy that beautiful view, my friend.
Thank you. I will.
I love it. Love that man, Chris Carter. Chris Carter's the GOAT, man. I tell you what. Love his coverage over there at Pittsburgh Steelers. Locked On Steelers, free and available everywhere you get your podcast, not to mention Locked On NFL with your boy Q. He's our boy Q, but you can also get that free and available everywhere and on YouTube, folks. But, Ross, this is an intriguing matchup. Obviously, I think the news of T. Higgins being out, I think it benefits the Steelers in this department, considering, yes, no TJ Watt, no Alex Highsmith. I think it kind of helps negate that a little bit. Now, if T. Higgins was active, I'd be a little concerned, but this is a Cincinnati Bengals offense that, in my opinion, they operate really well under Joe Burrow. And these matchups, these AFC North matchups, they're always just a slobber knocker, as a good friend Jim Ross would always say.
That's always my favorite way to describe certain divisions, and the AFC North is definitely one of them. So far, when it comes down to that division, you've seen fireworks all over the place, but also question marks all over the place. I mean, what is the health of Joe Burrow really like? Chris kind of brought into question his mobility so far this season, and it hasn't been the same as last year, which is to expect considering the injury that ended his season last year and him just now getting into rhythm. We're watching right now Lamar Jackson, who did a flip into the end zone, having some soreness from that celebration. You've got defensive injuries all over the place for the Steelers, and then you just have the Cleveland Browns out there that are just trying to, be able to take advantage where they could take advantage. So there's always a lot going on within this division, and it's a ton of fun to watch every single season. Let's get to a couple of your picks real quick, Cody. Within that very division, you've got the Steelers toppling the Cincinnati Bengals in this one. So no big concerns for you for this Steelers team, or as you mentioned, feeling better even without their defensive starters, particularly with the lack of firepower over on that Cincinnati Bengals offense.
Yeah, with Joe Hayden coming back, I like that. I mean, obviously, between Sutton and him, they can shadow Jamar Chase, and I think having Minkah over the top, which is interesting because, watching this defense, they play a lot of cover three match, probably more so than I thought that they would. I feel like they'd be a really good cover 2 team, but they're really missing that other guy opposite of Minkah Fitzpatrick that can excel in that role. So, like I said, you never know in these divisional matchups. We always have them, maybe going one way, leaning one way, and all of a sudden we get surprised. So I do think Cincinnati's going to be more competitive this season. I just think right now it probably benefits that this game is in Pittsburgh early on here in week 3 rather than maybe down the stretch.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think having that game at home right now while dealing with those injuries is absolutely sort of best of the worst, if you will. I want to say best case scenario, but I don't think it really goes that far. Let's take a look at a couple of other picks here before we dive into our fantasy segment. So we've got the, you correctly selected the Carolina Panthers to topple the Houston Texans. Would you take away from that game this weekend or this earlier this week?
Man, that Panthers defense is fun to watch. They're stifling so far. And obviously, Ross, you're the team that you cover, unfortunately, experienced that. They're a really good third down defensive team. I mean, I think if I'm not mistaken, they held New Orleans at 2 of 11 or 1 of 9 on third down in that matchup. It was one or the other. They held Houston to 1 of 9. It was 2 of 11 for the Saints the week prior. Man, Matt Rule, I tell you what, he's got these guys playing fired up. And look, Sam Darnold, he looks good. He looks good right now in that Carolina blue. And obviously the big storyline is Christian McCaffrey going down with the hamstring. He's going to miss some time. So you're going to see a lot of Chuba Hubbard. You're going to see a lot of Royce Freeman, who I'm excited for. I'm a big Rolls Royce fan. Want to see him have success. But, they're off to a hot start right now in that defense. Remember a couple of years ago, Matt ruled they just drafted all defense. It's starting to pay off with these young guys now. So if they can keep these guys, tell you what, they're going to be a fun unit to watch in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, too, on the defensive side, they lost J.C. Horn in this game as well. Broken foot. We'll see how long he's going to be out. But that's part of that pass rush being able to get there is because the receivers on the opposite side can't win off the line of scrimmage. We'll see how much the loss of J.C. Horn ends up impacting their ability to get after the passer and then not be thrown off of their base early on in game. So it'll be interesting to continue to watch that. This NFC South division right now, a whole big mix right now after the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Speaking of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you've got Tampa Bay toppling the Los Angeles Rams in what I truly agree and believe is going to be an NFC Championship preview. Do you expect the results here in the regular season that you predict to be indicative of what you might look for in the postseason as well?
It's really hard to say. It really, really is because, I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs, Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year, they played each other. Tony Romo's on the bracket. He's like, Jim, I think we're going to see this. I don't think this is the last time we see these two teams face each other, Jim. And so I think that this will be, one of those situations. Now, I think one of the intriguing storylines of this matchup, and obviously our good friend David Harrison, James Yark over there, Locked On Bucks, can touch on it. And obviously our boy Sosa over there, Locked On Rams. This matchup right now, you look at Cooper Kupp, and I tell you what, he is just having a fantastic start to the season for the Rams. I think having Matthew Stafford has been a tremendous upgrade at quarterback. And obviously we saw Jared Goff on Monday Night Football. Peyton Manning's expressions of some of the things Jared Goff did, I think tell you all you need to know about Goff. Like I said, I do think that this is going to be one of those matchups that's going to come down to who makes the first mistake, right? A critical mistake. And I think that'll be a difference maker. Look, if there's a defensive touchdown in this game, that team is going to probably win. Now, how unlikely is that? I mean, you never know in the NFL, but this is where it's going to be. I think we're going to see a very explosive game because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 39.5 points per game so far through 2 weeks. The LA Rams, 30.5 points per game through 2 weeks. And then you have the Rams defense only allowing 19 points. The Tampa Bay defense, though, allowing a little bit more, 27 points per game so far to start the season. So where do you go? It's kind of pick your poison at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's as close to a pick 'em as you're going to find when it comes to those two. It's an incredible matchup, and it should be a ton of fun to watch right now. Matthew Stafford, 5 touchdowns to 1 interception on the season, and you've just never seen Sean McVay happier on the sideline. I mean, the guy is just leaps and bounds. Very excited for his offense, and I completely understand why. New Orleans versus New England. Let's get into some familiar territory here. We've got New Orleans versus New England. Cody's going at New England there. New York Jets, Denver Broncos. Got to go Teddy Bridgewater up against those New York Jets. Let's start with the Denver Broncos. Let's start with your team here. Just how fantastic has Teddy Bridgewater been, and how great is it watching sort of this revelatory period of his as he gets back onto this outstanding pace?
I tell you what, Ross, it has been a tremendous surprise. I think if you're a Broncos fan, what Teddy Bridgewater has been able to do so far through 2 weeks. He's one of the most efficient quarterbacks right now in the NFL after 2 weeks. In terms of when he's pressured and blitzed, he's very efficient, has one of the best passer ratings, and he's also at the top of the list there in terms of you do not want to blitz him. So it's kind of like a pick your poison. The one thing that we've seen teams do, the New York Giants, Jacksonville, they came out and they're like, you know what, we're going to force Teddy Bridgewater to pass the ball. Teddy's like, all right, sounds good. Cool. 77% completion percentage in that first matchup against the Giants, 75% against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he has stood in the pocket, and the offensive line has given him some pretty good time to throw, despite the fact he took 3 sacks last week. One was just on one of those throwback type plays that the edge rusher came free. One was an interior leak by the right guard, and obviously Graham Glasgow will more than likely be available this week rather than last week. He missed, obviously, due to a heart issue. He had to undergo some testing due to some palpitations and irregular heartbeat during the Giants Week 1 game. But this Broncos offense so far has been a little bit more surprising than I think most people thought, because everybody said coming into the season, Teddy Bridgewater, all he is, he's just a check down artist. But he actually leads the NFL in most passes past 20-plus yards. He's taken a lot of shots downfield, which I'm not as surprised because I saw him do it in Carolina. It was just a product of the Carolina offense last year. I mean, you take away Christian McCaffrey, what do you have in Carolina? I mean, we're going to find out here very soon. But like I said, Teddy he's been a tremendous leader. And these players, Ross, I can tell you, I've spoken to a few Broncos players. They love what Teddy Bridgewater brings from a leadership standpoint. I mean, he has them believing. And one thing he said in the post-game huddle in the locker room victory speech, he said, don't be afraid of success. That right there for a lot of these young guys, they've never tasted success in Denver yet. So it's week by week. And Teddy Bridgewater, I feel like, is the right guy to be leading the charge right there. So they have belief in him. I think that's what the most important factor is. When your whole team believes in your quarterback, you have a good chance.
Yeah, absolutely. 13 passes attempted so far beyond 20 yards. That's 18% of his passes. He actually has a larger percentage of his attempts beyond 20 yards than between 10 to 19, where he's absolutely on fire. 9 of 10 over there, 90% completion percentage, 144 yards. And here's the thing that I really love. Deep over the middle of the field, his average depth of target on 4 passes, nearly 42 yards. This guy is not afraid to throw the ball down the field, despite what the reputation and the folks who have defined his reputation so far have to say about him. So you love seeing him target deep, but of course he's still somebody that could be surgical and precise close to the line of scrimmage as well. 33 of 37 between the first down marker and the line of scrimmage there. So he's somebody that can dice you up over the middle, death by 1,000 paper cuts, but that can also come and try to take the top off of this offense or of opposing defenses, and certainly has the weapons to do it over in that Denver Broncos offense. So have loved seeing it. As somebody that is a huge Teddy Bridgewater fan, Luke Braun and I, who do Locked On NFL on Tuesdays, big time Teddy Bridgewater guys, we're going to end up doing a whole episode devoted to the guy because he's been so much fun to watch so far this season.
Did you see that clip of that little girl that was cheering Teddy on this past week, Ellie Duncan of ESPN? That was such an adorable clip. I love that. I mean, we need more stuff like that. That was great.
Absolutely. Y'all, looks like we're dealing with some technical issues for our fantasy football guest, Vinny Iyer, but no worries. Monday through Friday, you can catch him on the podcast, Locked On Fantasy Football. So if you're looking for some fantasy football advice here before the game gets started, go and check out the Friday episode where he's got his sit start ready for you as well. Cody, in the meanwhile, let's roll along with some picks here for the day. We like to make sure we talk about every team out there. We were talking about New Orleans versus New England. Can New Orleans bounce back against the New England Patriots? More to the point, can New Orleans bounce back against Bill Belichick's defense? Not going to be an easy task for the Saints in Foxborough.
Yeah, it was hard for me to make this Patriots pick, Ross, because I was like, man, I feel for Ross right now. It was I think last week, and Ross, you could probably touch on this. I think it was a surprise what we saw, how New Orleans played versus Carolina. I don't think anybody expected it. I mean, I got 4 picks wrong last week. The Saints game was one of them. The Chiefs Ravens was one of them. The Seahawks Titans was one of them. I'm sitting here like, man, come on, Jameis, why you got to do me like that? But I also factored it in because we talked about it here on the pregame show. That New Orleans Saints team, the defense, they were missing a lot of key players, and they were missing just a lot of players on injured reserve or whatever it may be, suspension, whatever, all that stuff, COVID. And I felt like that was probably a difference maker. It doesn't help that in week 3, you have to take on the New England Patriots coming off of a very, very impressive defensive performance against Zach Wilson, forcing 4 interceptions on the day. Jameis Winston is going to have a very efficient game here today. Maybe try to come out and establish the run a little bit, but man, it's a tough test against that Patriots defense. How you feeling about this matchup, and what is the biggest key? If the Saints are going to win, what do they have to take care of today?
Yeah, I think over on the offensive side, it's exactly that. Establish the run game. Yes, that New England Patriots defense was very impressive, forcing all those turnovers and those interceptions in particular against Zach Wilson. They've been phenomenal against the pass so far. One of the best defenses in the NFL. They're 5th overall in the NFL, but they've been fantastic against the pass in particular. However, up against that New York Jets offense, they gave up 4.9 yards per carry as well. Alvin Kamara, Tony Jones Jr., this New Orleans Saints run game has to get going and establishing the run early. Even if they're not successful on the ground, right? Even if they're not averaging 4.9 yards per carry, they still have to establish it. It just helps to make play action better. Your run game doesn't have to be good for play action to work, right? We all know this now. However, establishing the run game early and then running play action plays out of the same types of spacing that you've run some of your run plays out of earlier on in the game does help to make them more effective. Running those inside zones, the stretch outside zones that the Saints like to run, where they've actually struggled quite a bit so far this season, particularly on their outside zone runs, which are a staple on this offense. If you get some of those going and then build play action looks off of that action, then you end up having more successful fakes, more successful abilities to roll out, extend the pocket, move the pocket for Jameis Winston. The other part is going to be, of course, that offensive line needs to perform much better than it did last week. 64% of Jameis Winston's dropbacks were under pressure, 3rd most in the NFL since they started tracking that metric. So it just does not get, it's one of those things where you look at it, you could look at it one of two ways, right? Can the New Orleans Saints get better versus can the New Orleans Saints not be that bad on the offensive line again, right? Like, it's hard to be that bad. On the defensive side, getting Marshawn Lattimore back, getting C.J. Gardner-Johnson back, getting Tano Passanio back, and then also having Peyton Turner available to you, getting some more depth at the linebacker spot with Pete Werner coming back to this game, all of that factors in. It is a new era of New Orleans Saints football to where, and I want to give a quick shout out to my guy over at the Straight Up Saints podcast, Chris Risvoglu, who also is over at The Spun, who mentioned this earlier today. People are excited to see the New Orleans Saints defense as opposed to the offense, which right now is at the bottom of the NFL. So you got to get right on both sides of the ball, but the defense certainly shored up quite a bit in the second half of that game against Carolina. Can they continue that momentum moving forward? They'll have to, up against the rookie quarterback, including getting pressure on him.
Well, obviously, no Michael Thomas back in the lineup just yet, as he's still on IR. The question I have for you, Ross, obviously, Marquez Callaway has emerged as the team's number one wideout in his absence. But what about the guys behind him? I know Traquan Smith has missed some time due to an injury. Who do you expect, or who needs to step up today? Because, look, going against J.C. Jackson and that tough secondary in New England is going to be a tough test.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy for them. And these New Orleans Saints receivers combined at the wide receiver position, only 11 catches so far this season. They gave up 8 on the defensive side to DJ Moore by himself last week. So this Saints receiving core has to take a big step forward while they have to wait until after week 6 to get Michael Thomas back. The Saints went ahead and reunited. I never thought that they would do this, but they reunited with Kenny Stills. So they drafted back in 2013, traded away to the Dolphins ahead of the 2015 season. He's back in New Orleans. He is a standard game day elevation and is active for this game. So much to the fact that they actually have one of the guys that has been active over the course of the entire season so far in Lil Jordan Humphrey inactive. So they expect him to have some type of a contribution for this offense. So I would look for Kenny Stills. I would look for Deontay Harris, most importantly, though. The guy's just incredible with the ball in his hand. If they can get the ball in his hand, in space in particular, he has an opportunity to continue to make plays. But you want to see Marquez Callaway and Jameis Winston get back on the same page like they were in the preseason and get that type of production going on again for this team. And I can't go without mentioning the coaches are back, all with the exception of 2 in this one. Ryan Nielsen, the assistant head coach and defensive line coach, a big deal to still be missing him, as well as your pass rush specialist in Brian Young. But everybody else, including the run game coordinator, Dan Rochar, who is a huge piece of what was missing last week, is back this week. So even just getting some of those coaches back will help to self-correct some of the issues that the Saints had last week. I'm going to roll with the Saints here, who are going to believe, Sean Payton never likes to come off of an embarrassing loss with another loss. He rarely does. So we'll see what they look like this week, trying to make sure they don't drop 2 in a row, just like they did last year.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's going to be a big test early on in the season. This is the time, Ross, too, where we don't really know at this point, this early on, who's a contender, who's a pretender. Way too early, right? Because I think after week 1, we can all make the assumption, okay, this team is a contender. This team's a pretender. But the reality is we just don't know yet. It's not about how you start. It's about how you finish. And luckily there's that additional 17th regular season game that they have added. And also, Ross, this week too, we also found out that for the NFL wildcard playoffs, there will be a Monday night football game. I don't know how I feel about that. Like if I'm the team that has to be playing on Monday night, you win, you have a shorter week in terms of your next divisional matchup. I don't know how I feel about that, but you know what? It is what it is, my friend.
That's right. Absolutely. I think the key is to make sure that the team in that conference with the bye week ends up playing Sunday so that you don't end up having the short week against the team that just had a bye week on a Saturday or something like that. There's some ways to make sure that it at least balances out in a way that's, interesting. But look, the NFL has already added another news day on Saturdays with these game day elevations on the practice squad and making sure that there are notable names able to be on the practice squad. We're talking about elevations of guys like Kenny Stills, Le'Veon Bell around the NFL. The NFL is going to continue to sort of broaden its approach and to try to take over as many days until eventually, Cody, we might have Monday through Sunday football. Who knows? We might get something every day.
I wouldn't be surprised, but NFL, fix the taunting calls, please.
Fix the taunting call. Get those out of there. All right, couple more games to get through here before we wrap up. The Atlanta Falcons, who have just been not very good so far this season, going up against the New York Giants. New York Giants looking to bounce back as well after a tough loss against the divisional rivals, the Washington football team. Right now, the New York Giants, I think we're both going that way up against the Atlanta Falcons. What are you seeing in this matchup?
Well, look, Evan Ingram is making his season debut here today against the Falcons. And I was actually impressed last week with how the Falcons played Tampa Bay. Now, defensively, probably not so much with all the points allowed, but they battled. Kyle Pitts looks fun. Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage. I know they're dealing with some injuries at the wide receiver position too, but for the most part here, I just think that the New York Giants, they're a lot better than their record indicates. You scored 29 points in that Washington football Thursday night thriller that we saw. You left about maybe 17 to 20 points out there on the field against a pretty solid Washington football team defense. I think that they're going to get guys more involved. The emphasis is that they're going to try to get Kadarius Toney, the rookie selection out of Florida, more involved in the offense because through the first couple of weeks, they've been utilizing him on end arounds and he's had negative total yardage. So some frustration by him. They're going to try to get him involved. Sterling Shepard has been off to a very good start. And I think that their wide receiving core against that secondary, I think it bodes well for the New York Giants. And look, Daniel Jones too. I know he gets harped on a lot by New York Giants fans, but he looked pretty good against the Washington football team, very efficient. You had a couple the touchdown drop by Darius Slayton. You had a touchdown run that he had called back due to a holding call. I mean, there's a lot of things you can look at, but the New York Giants, I think it's way too early to write them off. I think they're going to make a big-time statement here today. I think they're going to come away with a big-time victory.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. It's going to be the 8th straight loss for the Atlanta Falcons if they drop this game. They're already in their longest streak of the Matt Ryan era, but Matt Ryan usually has some good games up against the New York Giants, around 300 yards and a touchdown over the last handful of matchups against the Giants. It's one of the teams he performs best against, and they're going to need it because the defense for me in Atlanta has been the major concern, giving up over 40 points last week, and this offense just hasn't been able to keep up with it. And this New York Giants offense has the weapons to put points on the board, especially if they're going up against a favorable defensive matchup, which Atlanta has proved to be so far this season. Next, we've got Arizona at Jacksonville. This one feels a little bit more simple than maybe a Locked On Jags host Tony Wiggins would like, yeah?
Oh, man. You know what? And look, the Arizona Cardinals offensively, they've been super explosive this year. Kyler Murray has been fun to watch. I mean, last week, at one point, he was, I think, 30 of 33 passing at one point, and 2 of those incompletions were interceptions that had happened in that game against the Vikings. And obviously, I feel for our guy, Luke Braun, over there, Locked On Vikings. A missed field goal. The Vikings and kickers, that's the long-standing curse right now in the NFL between those two elements there. But this is a game where, watching the Jacksonville Jaguars last week, they really tried to stop the run against the Denver Broncos. Teddy carved them up. when you introduce a dynamic quarterback like Kyler Murray, who could do it with his legs, he can do it with his arm, and he's just been putting people on spin cycles so far. I look at Christian Kirk, DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green. I look at all these weapons, Edmonds at the running back position, and I think to myself, I don't think Jacksonville has enough guys to be able to cover or to be able to do this, because I think we're going to see the emergence of Rondale Moore. I think he's going to have several big plays in this game. And look, unfortunately for the Jaguars, they're coached by Urban Meyer right now, who, they told Vic Fangio last week, it's like playing Alabama every week. Not a good soundbite in terms of the optics so far. The Jaguars feel for our man, Tony Wiggins, but man, Trevor Lawrence, fun to watch. He's going to be good, but the rest of the team around him, they have to continue to grow.
Absolutely. Look, little number 4, but big Rondale Moore. Always looking for him on the field, man. He is a ton of fun to watch. We've got Washington going up against Buffalo. Washington still dealing with some injuries to that quarterback position. Buffalo looking to get back on track after a shaky start to the season. And then we have Seattle over Minnesota, and then that'll take us over to the primetime games. But out of the Buffalo win and the Seattle win here, which of these two games are you most intrigued?
We lost Ross Jackson for a quick moment.
I'm back.
He's back. For me, I'm gonna go with Buffalo here, and I'm eyeing Seattle because I felt like there was just a disappointing fourth quarter for them last week against the Tennessee Titans. They had it in the bag. Derrick Henry went off, late in that game, and the defense couldn't get stops. And there was a terrible taunting penalty on the Seahawks defense. It fires me up there, Ross. But I'm gonna go with the Buffalo.
Be careful, don't
game.
get flagged for taunting.
I know. One of us is going to get a flag here, but I'm going to go with the Buffalo game because for me, offensively, they blew out, obviously, the Miami Dolphins last week, but Josh Allen has not been the Josh Allen we saw last year so far to start the season. So I don't know what to make of that because it's been a little bit of a surprise so far to see him. The run game, they've been going with the running back by committee approach with Singletary and Zach Moss. Singletary more likely to be the feature back, but then in the red zone, Zach Moss comes in and takes over. So we'll see. We'll see how things go. But can Buffalo get going? Can they look like their offensive self? It's going to be tough going against Montez Sweat and Chase Young. But even that defense, they have some things they have to work out themselves too under Jack Del Rio. They're allowing too many yards per game, too many big opportunities on third down, and penalties have once again been a hindrance to that defense.
Yeah. Here's a little fantasy nugget for you. Terry McLaurin, wide receiver for Washington football team, has not had 2 consecutive games in his career so far where he hasn't had 100 receiving yards, right? Didn't have over 100 receiving yards last week. The trick is, up against Buffalo, they haven't allowed a receiver to have more than 75 receiving yards in the last little while. So it's going to be a little bit of an interesting matchup to see whether Terry McLaurin can get his way back to that 100-yard receiving way, and of course continuing that fantasy value. Open the season with one of the most phenomenal catches we've ever seen, by the way. So always excited to see Terry McLaurin out there.
Scary Terry, my friend. I love that guy. He's Tre'Davious White and him. That's going to be a fun matchup to watch. Like if you're a DB guy like me, you like defense, or if you're a wide receiver guy, I'm really intrigued at watching those two guys go up against each other here this Sunday.
For sure. There'll be a fun matchup. All right, let's get to the primetime games that are going to be wrapping us up. Sunday Night Football, Green Bay at San Francisco, and then Philly at Dallas for Monday night. You've got Green Bay, you've got Dallas. I'm agreeing on both of those. What are some of your takeaways here? Let's start off with Green Bay at San Francisco.
I'm a little uneasy right now on my Green Bay pick, considering some of the injury stuff on the offensive line. I think they're going to have a rookie tackle at the left tackle position for Aaron Rodgers.
3 strings down, too.
He looked good. He looked good on Monday night, but he's playing against the Detroit Lions, right? He looked like his normal self. Aaron Jones was fantastic for them. San Francisco is a little bit of a different animal. Now, I think one thing we're going to see is obviously that secondary in San Francisco is going to be tested. Obviously, they lost Jason Verrett after week 1 to a torn ACL. Their whole running back committee there in San Francisco is injured. So that, to me, I think is going to be a little bit of an interesting dynamic to follow, because if San Francisco can't run the game, Green Bay, they know that they're going to have to pass the ball. I think obviously it was Zadarius Smith on injured reserve, if I'm not mistaken, for the Packers. That's a big blow, but this is going to be one of those interesting matchups. It's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be good, but it should not have been the Sunday Night Football game. I'm going to go with Green Bay in this one. Tampa Bay, LA, how did they just say, we can't flex that? Come on.
Yeah, I know, right? Maybe it's too early in the season, but maybe that's another rule change that we see starting up next season. Yes, but being without Zadarius Smith with a Green Bay pass rush that just is not the same pass rush that it was last year, even when Zadarius Smith was on the field to open up the season. I believe it's only 1 sack so far by Green Bay over those first 2 games. And San Francisco on the other side, fantastic offensive line in San Francisco. We've always known it, but only 1 sack allowed over those first 2 games. So expect Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe a couple of snaps for Trey Lance. Expect these guys to be clean here in San Francisco. And I think you're right. Maybe a little bit uneasy for Green Bay Packers fans right now, considering the injuries on the offensive line for Aaron Rodgers and the Pack. All right. Dallas with the win over Philly at home. How are you feeling about the NFC East matchup here? These are always fun. I love when they're in primetime.
Oh, this is going to be a fun matchup. And not to mention, we get Eli Manning, Peyton Manning here once again. I'm excited about that. But, for me, I've been very impressed with Jalen Hurts so far to start this season. I thought they had a really good, fun, competitive game against the San Francisco 49ers last week. But the difference in that game really was San Francisco had a 16-play drive that took 9 minutes off of the board in that second half, and then they punched it in. I mean, that's very efficient football by San Francisco. Now, you worry about that run game there. But Jalen Hurts had a couple of big plays downfield. Obviously, in terms of accuracy, he's going to have to work on that. But, he found a 91-yard passing completion. I think you have to keep an eye on this matchup just from the standpoint, too. Dallas, they have so much firepower. Now, I don't yet know the status of Amari Cooper. I hadn't been following. I just know that he took a shot last week against the Chargers, and he did not return late in that fourth quarter. So is he going to play in this game? Obviously, you're going to see Michael Gallup. You're going to see CeeDee Lamb. And you got the run game going between Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, it was good last week for them against the Chargers. I think they're going to try to do the same exact thing here. It's early on in the season, and this is these divisional matchups where how you kind of finish in the division, if you can play your division rivals early, get a couple of wins, it gives you momentum potentially down the stretch here when you have more of your divisional games down at the end of the season. So I think that we're going to see a fun and entertaining game. I think it's going to come down to a last-second field goal here once again, and Dallas is going to come out on top.
Love it. Tony Pollard right now, 7.7 yards per carry. Ezekiel Elliott, 3.9. Take for that what you will. No, I'm just kidding. But obviously, this run game over in Dallas has been fantastic. You talk about the number 6 offensive attack for Dallas going up against the number 3 defensive team, third-ranked defensive team for the Philadelphia Eagles. And we also talked about Tom Brady leading the NFL right now in passing touchdowns with 9. Right behind him, Jalen Hurts with 8. So this should be a very fun, fireworks-filled matchup between a couple of quarterbacks who are able to produce all over the field and at all 3 levels. Going to be a very fun week of football. Was another very fun episode here of Locked on NFL Sunday. Expect some changes to happen across this show all throughout the season. Good things, though. I'm just going to say we're moving on up. So very excited to see what's up next for this show. And all of you that have continued to support, thank you very much for taking the time. And Cody, at Cody Roark, NFL, host of Locked on Broncos. Myself, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Hola, host of Locked on Saints. Always a pleasure to be here with you, buddy, every Sunday morning talking some football.
Absolutely. We love being here and obviously having football fans join in on the conversation. This is a football pregame show, all football talk, no fluff. You get that here, Locked on NFL Sunday. So excited for the changes that will be coming. I tell you what, football fans, you're going to be blown away by it, and make sure that you stay in the loop just so you don't have to miss out on the action. You can get a seat on the plane, on the bus right now. So don't wait for for everyone else to be on it for you to get left behind. We ain't going to do that to you. We have you covered here. All the football talk. Just a reminder, you can find your favorite Locked on podcast, whether it be NBA, NHL, MLB, college. We have everything for you here for the team that you root for on Sundays through Mondays on the Locked On Podcast Network.